Okay, good evening, dear hearts, and welcome to another episode of the Inner Dance Show. And supporting us in a return to sacred flow this evening is the phenomenal Rory McPhee. And Rory has worked in Botswana as a builder, in London and Athens as a shipping lawyer, in Cornwall as a boat builder and marine ecologist, in Edinburgh and Lochfine as a seaweed entrepreneur, and now he's based in Fife, setting up Lindor Curative Forest. Like, what a phenomenal background. But I've also had the pleasure of meeting Rory when we shared a day creating frame drums at the Falkland Estate in Scotland. So I've had the chance to hang out with this very cool man. So it's a great honour, Rory, that you're spending an hour with me this evening just to chat about really what lights you up and about the sacred work that you're supporting here in Scotland. So I'm curious, how are you today?
I'm very well, Caroline. Greetings to your listener. It's windy, but I've been working outside all day, so I'm full of wind and sun and joy. The joy of being in the forest.
Beautiful. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about Lindor Curative Forest and all the sorts of things that you get up to.
Okay, well, I've owned the forest since 2014.
Wow.
I came up to Scotland, which is the land of my fathers. We're a Glaswegian family, and I came up to Scotland to start a seaweed business, help start a seaweed business, but also to introduce myself to my ancestry. And I've always identified as Scottish, but I've always, I was in a kilt when I was 2 years old, and there's a little photograph of me at Glasgow Airport, age 3, with a kilt that's about 3 inches above my ankles. flying off to Kenya for where my father worked. So I came back to Scotland 2013, 2014. Was involved with the seaweed, but my main love is making useful and useless things out of wood, whether it's a boat or a spoon, or a chair. And I take on commissions and do big projects. And so to have my own forest, with my forest workshop, it's a lovely idea. But Caroline, I'm 68 this year, and part of age is the glimmer of some sensibility. you know, Finally growing up and realizing that it's a big world, and that the word service, comes into the frame. So I thought, well, I've got this lovely land. I've got a beautiful view of Dundee. I've got the ancient settlement of Norseman's Law behind me to the south. So what can I do with this land? And I read about Shinrin Yoku, which is a Japanese technique, developed in the 1980s to introduce people to nature and get out and enjoy the trees. So I trained in Australia as a forest therapist. And the essence of the training is that nature does the therapy.
Yes.
The human is merely the interlocutor and the witness. So I've done quite a lot of training in the art of witnessing, which we could talk about maybe a bit later, which I find a really powerful thing
Yes.
to do with people. And I mean, just to give you and the listener an example. So I will have a group in the forest here, and often the trees bring to mind of the participants their father, and it's often the female participants, and they'll start to cry because they remember their father as being in his shed making a wooden train set, or being out fishing, being in nature. And the reason that they're crying is because they are aware of their father embracing nature, but they're also aware that that embrace of nature excluded the child.
Mm.
Yeah. Where's dad? Oh, he's in his shed. Don't interrupt him. And so my mission really is to bring people and nature together, but people in community, people in their natural families, or people in their community families, and by essentially sitting around a fire with wood smoke and good food, that's kind of all it is.
That sounds beautiful. It sounds so deeply restorative and healing, not only to be in such
Mm.
a powerful space and the medicine of being in a forest, but to bear witness to one's own grief, to honour our ancestry, and to be witnessed within that process. And I guess I'm really hearing that how important community is for you as well. It's like you take care of a
Yeah,
community of trees and a community of people who come to sit with those trees.
yeah. Well, there was one of our great Scottish intellects, Patrick Geddes, who was a man of Perth, but spent a long time in Dundee. He actually developed the word ecologist in the late 19th century, and he was a town and country planner. So his whole thing was to bring nature into the urban space.
Mm.
But he developed this trinity of these three words: um, place, people, and purpose. And for me, that really sums up um, the essence of life, and people being community. But what I do is I bolt on another word, because we are in a you know a slightly advanced era to Edwardian times, and I put on the word play. So for
Mm.
me, there's four P's: place, people, purpose, comma, play. And it's the play which locks into our emotional self, and it's our emotional self which I believe gets very little oxygen in this day and age.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what a natural evolution to what Patrick Geddes was
Mm,
understanding. Is really at the root
yeah,
of who we are. And
yeah.
so, alongside, for working outside, being a forest therapist, how can people play in these spaces? What does play look like?
Well, you can hear play. I had my two grandwins up last week, aged 9 and 6,
Mm-hmm.
and um, they arrived in the forest, and in the yurt where they were sleeping, there were little presents, of course, and the space and the shade and the witness of the trees.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Within an hour, they were running around. When they weren't running around laughing, they were ambling, dandering, stravaiging. They were just sauntering through the forest. But whilst they were doing that, they were humming.
Mm.
And I always remember, taking my own daughter, age 4, 5, 6, for Sunday walks. Um, and the moment we were in the trees, and the moment she started humming, I knew that her emotions were open, and therefore play was um, something that we could start doing. And it could be skipping, it could be skimming stones, it could be because of my African background, I've got an old African game which we call Botswana Morabaraba, or Mancala in Egypt, I think it is. And essentially, it's a traditional form of drafts, but it involves simply 12 holes in the ground with 4 pebbles in each hole. So by having a sort of nature-based board game, in inverted commas, or it could be frisbee, or it could be archery, um, just play. What do we need to have to play? We don't
Mm.
need anything. So the kids get it.
Yeah, they
It's the adults that don't.
totally just. I guess what I'm hearing is that the forest invites and evokes a state of play.
Yeah, yeah,
That play isn't necessarily it's a thing that we do. It's a way of being.
exactly. And what's the game that we can play without? artifact, grandmother's footsteps, hide and seek. And tomorrow I've got uh, two little girls coming up with their mum, and they're 2 and 4. And of course, what I do is I smile at them and then go behind a tree, and then they go, "Where's Rory?" And then I put my head around, and and that sort of wide-eyed, aw awesome look in their faces, the look of awe, which I can get just by simply standing behind a tree and looking at them and then hiding again, and they just go, "Where's Rory? Where's Rory?" So that's play, and as I said, the kids get it. The adults are a little bit harder.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's a phenomenal support for you to be playful every day.
Yeah, you should see me. Fortunately, there's no CCTV up here, but um, we don't want to take life too seriously, do we?
Do you feel that the trees are interacting with you and are becoming part of the play?
It's You've got the right word there, feel. So it's a purely an emotional response.
Mhm.
Um, but to put it into words involves the brain logic, and I can't express it other than I write quite a lot of poetry, so I kind of put it into a poem. But all I can offer you is a visual of me with a chisel in one hand and a mallet in the other, and then I'll stop chiseling and I'll just gaze blankly into the sky or through the trees in a daydream. And to the casual observer, it might look like I'm having a bit of a moment, but actually I'm being transported. Um, and the genesis of that transportation is there's a lovely old saying from the indigenous folk in Northern America, particularly, where Uh, so in essence, it's before you start any craft activity, you must take anger out of the body, because if you're weaving a basket and you're
Mhm.
angry, that basket will hold that anger, and that anger will go with the basket over many years. So I
Right.
start my day off doing I guess you would call it a spiritual process of a bit of somatic movement, a bit of drumming with the drum, the drum workshop which we attended together, and some other sort of routines, which I really always follow the same routine, and that just gets me into a place of acceptance,
Mhm.
and any residual anger evaporates, and that allows me to start the crafting, and then allows me to be transported into a sort of gormless, dribbling state of utter bliss.
Wow. Well, I'm hearing you taking such responsibility to ensure that you are a clear and loving vessel to receive the guidance from the forest to be able to create the pieces that you do. And I'd never actually, although I guess I do maybe similar things with my own practices and crafts. I'd never heard it in that way, that something about how our anger can be transferred onto the objects that we create.
Mm, yeah, well, it makes sense, doesn't it?
It really does.
But it's an interesting word that you've used there, vessel, because all of my creative work is about making containers, whether it's a boat or a bowl, um, and that goes all the way back to my early youth of being sent away to a boarding school where all we had was what was called then a tuck box, which was a small wooden box into which all treasures were kept and locked. Um, and occasionally a bully would open the tuck box and empty everything, which would cause huge emotional distress. So I carry this image of a of a locked box, and my creative work is to try to unlock that vessel, unlock that box by making open vessels, which can be navigated on the sea by as a boat, or a massive, great bowl for sushi rice or whatever it is. So vessel is quite an important word up here for me.
Wow. Gosh, what a way to transmute and transform those painful memories, that to create a box that can open. And I guess, the way my mind works is, I'm hearing you speak of the sort of Father Spirit and the qualities of the forest that are the divine masculine, and for me, the box, the container, is the divine feminine. And you're working with one to support the other.
Interesting. I'll think about that. Thank you for that. It's a visual.
But yeah, gosh, I mean, I'm gonna assume that when you were a young boy, that you wouldn't conceive that the container, the vessel, would be so significant for you in your life's purpose.
Well, exactly. But as a 6-year-old, I was only aware that the box contained my emotions, which had to be locked up, because if you show emotion in a single-sex boarding school away from the family, if you show emotion, you become vulnerable, and that vulnerability can lead into very dangerous territory.
Yes, absolutely. So, how did you get into working with your hands, as with your building and your creating?
With a bit of a struggle, actually, Caroline. I never had the confidence as a teenager or a young man to do anything of a practical level. And at school, in pottery class or art class, there was always boys who were preferred and much better than me. And I remember in divinity, age 10, we were asked to draw St. John the Baptist, if that name is correct. And I drew this. I couldn't draw it, so I got 1 out of 10. And my pal Alistair Wilson, who was a brilliant artist, drew a very good John the Baptist, and he got 10 out of 10. And I was outraged. I said, I understand the spiritual significance of John the Baptist. He doesn't. I just can't draw. So I always had this, sort of being at the bottom of, the dunces end of the woodwork class. And that was because in those days, if you were doing woodwork, you would have to make a square box with dovetails, and it all had to be. There was no intuition, there was no heart, there was no emotion to it.
Yes.
And it was really only when I got to age about early 30s that I thought that I might have a fighting chance of being able to make something that didn't get laughed at. And I had an epiphany with a book called Green Woodwork by a fellow called Mike Abbott, who's still going, which I bought just 2 years before my daughter was born. And I read it on the train, and essentially it was saying you can make anything you want out of freshly cut wood, rather than doing what most people do, which is to buy wood and dry it within an inch of its life and then saw up this hard wood. So essentially, the whole key to my work up here is cutting a tree down, rough shaping the tree when it's soft and wet. Again, that's you mentioned the divine masculine, but within that, the tree world, there is the softness, the malleability, which allows me to make the chair parts, which then get dried and then finally shaped to be made into a chair or a boat. So the process, we're now relearning the process of making chairs, artifacts, in the traditional way before kiln dried wood came along. So I'm a bit of an evangelist for what we would call green woodwork, and I've been overjoyed because in the 1990 I was a lone voice in in the land of woodwork, and now there's these brilliant young men and women making greenwood chairs or greenwood spoons, and it's become quite an important movement.
Well, I imagine that they were inspired by your work and that you really are a pioneer in coming back to this very ancient craft.
Yeah, well, it's what we call it's either the leading edge, Caroline, or the bleeding edge. It's often it's often the first movers. So this, I found this with the seaweed, that the first movers often have come up, have the idea, and then there's about a microsecond before all my work gets copied by people who are much more proficient than I, and I just sort of end up sort of going, oh well, it was a nice idea. I'll move on to the next brilliant revolutionary pioneer
I like that, the
thought.
leading edge, the bleeding edge. Yes,
Right.
indeed. But wow, it sounds like you have sort of led the way for a sacred return to sort of green woodworking and yeah, reclaiming a lost craft. And you know, that microsecond can stretch to infinity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What?
I mean, um, it's just occurred to me actually. I mean, I've been doing quite a lot of studying of family constellation theory,
Okay.
Bert Hellinger and all that,
Hmm.
and it's just occurred to me that this need that I have to look back into the past, whether
Mm.
it's traditional ways of making a chair or hunting seaweed, as my great grandparents used to do in Northern Ireland. It's trying to lock into the ancestral heritage to understand the old ways as a way of understanding perhaps ancestry, and by understanding how my great grandfather, for instance, who was a journeyman joiner in Glasgow, by understanding how he would make something out of wood, it leads me to a greater acceptance of my family background, and I think probably acceptance is the key word within family constellation theory. Not sure, but just a thought.
So, do you feel that by um, working the way you do with seaweed, with wood, that you are sort of bridging timelines and making contact in some way energetically with your ancestors, like recent and further apart?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And it's the boats that I build are essentially um, designs from the old days in Ireland, as in the fifth, sixth, seventh century, the medieval era of Ireland. And I've always been fascinated by Celtic spirituality and practice and poetry. And the question is, what can be salvaged from the historic record from those days, and how can that be embraced in these days with all the challenges we've got, for instance, with climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the main fascination I've got is the Celtic monks in the fifth, sixth century would go off on their curraghs, these boats made of twigs, basically covered in oxhide, and they would push the boat off from the shore, and this was what they would call an imran, which was a spiritual voyage, a spiritual journey. So whereas the desert fathers in Palestine would go off to the desert, the Celtic brothers, those brothers, would build a little boat, and wherever the boat landed, because the boats were very susceptible to the wind, so the boat would land, and on the boat there would be a rock which was called a lechi, and that rock would become the foundation stone for a kirk, a church, or an oratory wherever they landed,
Wow.
whether it was Cornwall or Wales or Brittany or Galicia. So this, and of course, if you're on a small boat at sea, you have to eat, and fish are actually quite difficult to catch. So seaweed, which is full of protein and other good nutrients, seaweed would have been the food that the ancient voyagers would eat to survive. And so this is this links all of my fascinations into one image, and that is the Imram, the seaborne pilgrimage.
Yes. Wow. So, and do you go out in your own boat that you make yourself to forage for seaweed? I don't know, what's the verb to get seaweed? Is it to forage? Is it
to gather?
to gather seaweed? Thank you.
Yeah, to gather seaweed. Yeah, I did. I mean, in 2014, we got a huge amount of the seaweed company that we started. Got a huge amount of publicity, and have you heard of Paul Hollywood, who's supposed to be, he's a famous chef? Okay, so we're doing a bit of filming with him, and I had my currach on King's Barnes Beach in Fife, and I had two on either side. I had Irish seaweed baskets that I'd made with an amazing guy called Joe Hogan, an Irish basket maker. And the producer went, right, we want Rory and his currach in the shot. And the people that were running the company said, no, you can't do that. You've got to have us in the shot. And the producer, no, but we want the currach. so it kind of rather stole the show, because it is, it's a long black boat, beautiful, shaped like a, really, very beautiful, sleek. And I haven't really had that much time in Scotland, but certainly when I was down in Cornwall, the currachs that I built down there, I did some massive coastal voyages, and foraging for marsh samphire up the estuaries, or seaweed on the sea, fishing for mackerel. And that is, if you ask me to define freedom, I would say being on a currach that I built myself.
Yes, yeah.
With a pair of oars and a fishing net, and a bottle of olive oil and some salt and some pepper. That's all I need, and a box of matches.
That's you very happy. I can imagine that with your little salt and pepper shaker and your seaweed ready to go, as fresh as can be.
Yeah.
So
Well, the Irish monks. Sorry, carry on.
No, please. I'm far more interested in what you have to say.
Well, the traditional way of eating seaweed, there are, we've got about 600-700 species of seaweed in the UK waters. Wow. But the seaweed which people most know about is called dulse or dillisk, which is a red seaweed, which we're ready to harvest in a few weeks' time. And so the traditional way of cooking that would be to come ashore in your currach, light a fire, and put a big rock on the fire. The rock would heat up, and then the fresh purple seaweed would go on the rock, and with a long stick, it would be turned over frequently to dry out and cook. And the seaweed turns from red, purple to green. When it turns green, it's ready to eat, and the taste of that, you would not believe it.
Wow.
And it's full of protein. I mean, it's, you're not going to get full, but often, the less you eat, the healthier we feel. If you've got enough nutrients in your body and you've just got fresh water and a bit of seaweed, after 3 or 4 days of that, the mind, body, soul, and emotions all knit together wonderfully.
Yes. So for somebody who's maybe interested in introducing seaweed into their diet, but they really don't know, where to buy it for a start, or how to introduce it, is it something that you would want to eat every day? Would it be, how would you go about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have seaweed every day mostly. and it's something which I teach on workshops, and it's not an easy, because it's so uh, much out of our culinary culture.
Hmm.
But for instance, I would get some brown, what they call kelp, um, long brown seaweed. The local name would be orweed. Dry it, um, toast it by fire, crush it up in a pestle and mortar to a powder, and then just simply use that as a salt. So any bit of food, you take a pinch or two of seaweed powder or seaweed grains and sprinkle it on your
Okay.
food. That's the easiest way to do it.
Well, okay. I might have to head down to the beach one day and get gathering. And for people that
Okay.
maybe don't have the time for that, are there places that you can purchase seaweed that's already been prepared for you? And
Yeah, you can buy um, recently I saw at Balgove Larder just outside St Andrews, our
hmm
old brand Mara seaweed. Um, that's been taken over by a new company, but they're still selling seaweed under that brand. And so for £5 you can get a packet of kombu or kelp, the brown seaweed. Do a bit of research and away you go. So it's relatively easy to buy. The cheapest way is to, or the most accessible way is just to go to the local Chinese supermarket
right,
and get some nori sheets. Again, good food value, good protein, good iron levels in that. And but the trick with the nori, which you buy in sheets, which everyone will know from the sushi, is to lightly toast them first. That crisps them up and introduces a kind of nutty flavour to them. So a bit of an adventure to the local Chinese shop. So in Dundee, you've got Matthews just down by the harbour.
I know the one you mean. Yep,
That's
I'm thinking that might
yeah.
be
So
a good starting point
just
for
go
me.
down,
And
just go down there. Yeah,
what about seaweed supplements? I know that maybe perhaps some shops might sell, yeah, tablets or things like that. Would you recommend something like that, or is it better really to?
yeah, yeah. No, I could. There's two companies. One called Seaweed and Co.
Hmm.
and the other Napier's. So they both sell seaweed, which is just seaweed that's been dried and milled into a powder. They sell that in capsules, and that is 100% pure seaweed. There's no additives. And the beauty about the encapsulation is that they've done a lot. They do a lot of laboratory tests, and so one pill will deliver 350 micrograms of iodine, and so people take the encapsulated seaweed mainly for iodine. And I do emphasize that if you ever feel a little bit cold, November evening, feel a bit cold and tired, if the ends of your fingers are quite numb, it could very well be iodine deficiency, particularly if you're vegan or vegetarian. And I do really advise strongly to keep iodine levels up. So I frequently do iodine tests on people, and we are mostly iodine deficient. So you can either have a slab of haddock every week or a bit of seaweed, or both.
Both sound like like a delicious options. But yeah, definitely going to
Yeah.
look into. I remember you saying to me when we met, because I always had cold. I was really, really cold. You saying that I should bring seaweed into my diet, and I absolutely intended to, and then obviously just went back to my old routine and didn't do anything about it. So it's really nice to be able to have this conversation to kind of re-inspire me to start eating greener.
Anything I can do to help you, Caroline, just
Well, I'm curious, what other benefits are there to eating seaweed?
um, well, there's a wealth of nutrients in seaweed. So, for instance, so we know we should have calcium for our bone health to keep osteoporosis at bay. But calcium don't work unless it's got a bit of magnesium to go with it.
Hmm.
So seaweed's got, so the sea lettuce, for instance, has got elements of calcium and magnesium. So for foods, if you're looking for you know um, a wealth of nutrients in your diet, seaweed is a good way in.
Mm.
And particularly as fruit and veg gets expensive,
Mhm.
because of Brexit, the tomato trade is not doing very well. And if we live, we live in Scotland, it's part of our heritage. You don't need to go off and you know spend a fortune on iceberg lettuces, because there's far more nutrient dense food at sea, under the water, the seaweed.
Yeah. I wonder why it never became a cultural sort of ingrained and embedded in our culture that this could be part of our diet. Do you
But
know
it did. It was. It
it was?
was.
Do you know when
So
that started
yeah,
to change historically?
yeah. In about 1930s, 1940s. So seaweed, particularly on the west coast and particularly in Ireland. Still in Ireland, it's a daily part of the culture. The thing is that seaweed was regarded as famine food, or food
Right.
which the poor people ate.
Mhm.
And as we got richer and more elevated, you wouldn't be seen dead eating the food that your grandparents ate.
Wow.
So that's why we're now realizing that the wisdom of our forebears, and
Mhm.
um, moving back into the putting seaweed into our diet. And I've got a book called The Scots Kitchen by Fiona McNeill, I think it is. She was from Orkney, and she was a suffragist and an amazing woman, one of Scotland's heroes, unrecognised heroes. And she wrote a book, this recipe book, and there's a whole chapter devoted to seaweed.
Great.
And this was published in 1911 first, I think. So you know, it's part of our culture. If you back in the day in New Zealand, you would buy sea meal, I think it was called, which was ground up, what we would call sea moss, which you make into a porridge. So it's only in the past 50 years that we've kind of forgotten it, and
Mhm.
that's why 20, when was it, 2008, I was quite um, uh, exercised by the fact that we just couldn't buy seaweed unless it was very expensive from the health food shop.
Mhm.
So that's why I got the first license in England to gather seaweed and try to bring the wealth of our native seaweeds into our diet.
Well, that's an amazing act of revolution to be the first person to
Yes,
get a license so that you could reintroduce seaweed back into our diet, back into our culture, and to, I suppose, reclaim it. If it was something that our forefathers and mothers would
yeah,
eat and gather, and then it became too elitist to eat, and then it was becoming too
exactly,
expensive and too elitist
exactly,
to eat now as well. It's funny, isn't it? How-
exactly. And I mean, going back to that people, place, purpose
Yeah.
idea, that you can go out and buy seaweed now. Okay,
Yes.
so that was, the result of. I emphasise that I had the first license in England. Scotland was different. There were licensees earlier than me in Scotland. Scotland's far more advanced than England, as we know. But if you want to introduce seaweed into your diet, the best way is to get a few people together, go on a workshop, go on a course, half a day with me, or East Nuke Seaweed down a little bit around the corner from here. We'll teach you how to do this, and then just get 5 or 6 of you, look at a tide table, and go out and gather some seaweed. And it's the greatest fun, because you've got your pails there, you've got your weans, you've got a little bag, you put your seaweed in, you go, this is what Rory said we should do this. No, he didn't. Rory said we should, and they haven't, but then phone me up, and so you've got the beautiful beach, the place, you've got the people who you go with, and you've got the purpose, which is to get free food.
Amazing. And would go out on your boat? Is that part of the experience?
Well, I do. I mean, I used to take people out, but I don't do it anymore. But you don't need a boat to go seaweeding because you just walk at low water. You just walk down and be mindful about footing,
Yes.
and because it's quite slippy, and find a clean beach and just go and pick away. And I mean, 3 or 4 hours picking seaweed, and you get enough seaweed for a year.
So, sounds like
Um,
a really blissful way to spend an afternoon.
well, why not? And as I said, it's apart from the cost of fuel, it's free food. So and it's and when you picked it, light a fire, brew up a cup of tea, let the kids play on the beach. It's all win-win.
And are these sorts of seaweed experiences something that you offer as part of like your forest? Yeah, the services that are available.
Yeah, I mean, I've stepped back from public facing stuff, so I don't run so many workshops these days. I did a lot down in Cornwall, some up
Hmm.
here, and but others have taken on the role, and I'm afraid I'm getting in my old age. I'm getting quite. It's very difficult to wrinkle me out of the forest. You know, it's just so beautiful. So I'll go and do some workshops and do some seaweed gathering for myself and do some experimentation.
Hmm.
Um, but look, in this autumn, I'll be doing bi-monthly supper clubs up here, which fire and food, which will involve which seaweed will take a starring role. So 7 people for each supper club, and see what happens.
That sounds lovely. Certainly, for all the listeners, presently and in the future, and also for myself, it's definitely worth checking that out. And would we just go onto your website, Rory, or your Instagram account to get more information about those sorts of offerings?
Yeah, Instagram. Again, I mean, I kind of rely on word of mouth. I'm really bad at business and all that kind of stuff, um, so I don't have a website, but Instagram is my main. Instagram and Facebook are my main notice board, and people can find me under Rory McPhee Crafts or Lindor Forest.
Yes, and I'll certainly make sure that that information goes up afterwards for anyone who's
Oh,
interested
thanks,
or wants to know a little
thanks.
bit more. Yeah, amazing. So I'm hearing the magnetism of the forest that it's really calling you more and more, and you find that you're spending more and more time within it.
I am, and I mean, when I'm outside in the real world or unreal world,
Mm,
I get quite tired by people and machines, and so that's kind of in a way the downside of spending so much time in the forest is because I'm so locked into the rhythms and the energetics here,
yes.
um, that leaving it and going to Edinburgh to do whatever, or it's I come back. Well, I just can't wait to get back. And I come back and I have to meditate and sleep. And
Hmm.
um, there's, you know, being in the natural environment is beautiful and wonderful, but there is a lot to do. There's wood to be chopped for the winter. There's every season, there's work to be done. So at the moment, I'm taking the bark off spruce trees to make containers. This time of year, the bark can be peeled off very easily. At other times of year, it's not possible. When that bark harvest is finished, in the autumn. I'll be going around collecting bark for medicine. So scraping off willow, for instance, willow bark, which is good. Willow bark tea is very good for winter colds. So there's a lot, and just the act of collecting bark from trees
Hmm.
sustainably, and then steam distilling them in my big copper distilling equipment. It's a lot of time. Um,
Yes.
and it's not as if I'm making better. I've got no time. I mean, so just the act of collecting, gathering natural materials to use or to eat, is very time consuming.
Mm. I'm just sensing just an entirely different kind of rhythm to how you're
Mm.
living your life. Just to
Well,
read. Yeah.
this is what people, we've been doing for thousands of years.
Yes.
And I remember a friend of mine went up to North Norway and did stay with the Sami tribes, particularly the Water Sami, and he said that what really struck him was that how much they look forward to winter, and many reasons for that. It's easier to track animals in the winter.
Hmm.
You're just living in a big fridge, so if you've got some elk meat, it doesn't go bad. There's no midges, there's no mosquitoes. You've got the northern lights, but also it's um, in the winter there's everything. The plants and trees are dormant, so it's quiet. In the summer, there's, as I mentioned before, the energy from the plants and the trees, and
Hmm.
the need to make the most of uh, this natural wealth here. It's busy, and so bring on the winter. Really, the winter's the best time.
So is that something that resonates with you also, that there's something about the stillness or the silence of
Yeah,
wintertime that's peaceful for you compared to,
yeah,
it sounds like, the vibration and the buzz of the summer?
yeah, yeah. Well, and it starts at Samhain, so October the 31st, where things just start settling down. Winter solstice is, I just absolutely adore that. And actually feel quite sad when the days start to lengthen.
Hmm.
Um, and because it's like, there's no everything's dormant. Um, and apart from harvesting some hazel for my boat building projects, in theory, the jams have been made, and the kimchi has been, is bubbling away, and everything's been gotten ready for solstice, and then it's
Hmm.
just party time. There's nothing to do other than just have fun, sit around the fire, and tell stories.
It sounds lovely.
Yeah, that's what we're here for.
So do you actually live on the land? Do you have like a lodge or a house, or do you travel to the forest every day?
Well, I stay up here as much as I can,
Yeah.
and but I wouldn't say I live here. But it's a working forest, so it's my
Yeah.
workshop. So
Yes. How
as I
big is
said,
that workshop?
it's 5 acres.
5 acres. Wow. Do you know
Uh, you
every?
know, No, I'm the for my own land in the inverted commas, the land which I steward is five
Yes.
acres, and it's within a 200-acre forest ecosystem.
Right.
And I'm still walking around my land in inverted commas, going, "What's that tree doing? I haven't seen that tree before." Uh, and of course, I've got another 195 acres to explore.
Yes.
Um, and of course, each day is different because the light's different.
Yes.
And at the moment the sun is getting lower in the skies. So there's areas which were bathed in sunlight a week ago and now are in shade. And the leaves will have leaf fall. There already the leaves are coming off the sycamore trees. So it's just like being in a cinema with a 365-day film.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That just sounds so magical. I can imagine if I was in that forest, I would be speaking to every single tree every day. And do you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
actual conversations with them, or is it more telepathic? How do you sort of, do you feel that there is that sort of exchange of information?
yeah. There's the most uh, the tree with which I am most intimate is
Hmm.
a 70-year-old birch tree, and that's the mother tree because all the other birches came from that one tree's seed.
Wow.
And she's held within the middle of the forest, and it's quite unusual to get a veteran, what we call veteran old trees, veteran trees. It's
Hmm.
quite unusual to have a birch tree of such longevity. They usually we call them pioneer trees, so that birch tree is the first tree which will grow on after a storm, and the roots go down very deep, so that there's a lot of nutrient value in the tree. So when it dies, the soil that it creates is super nutritious for successor trees
Hmm.
like the willows and the hazels to come up. But the reason why birch is so revered in the northern hemisphere as a medicine tree is because of this its high nutrient value. So from the bark you'll get betulic acid, I think, which there's quite a lot of research, uh, peer-reviewed research looking at the birch trees, the betula species, as a preventative for breast cancer. Um, Now I've known 5 women with breast cancer, 3 of which died, and one died. A friend of mine died this weekend. So
Gosh.
I'm very have a heightened awareness about breast cancer, and the preventative measures that should be taken. So I've got no medical training. I'm a boat builder, so don't but I do advise any of the listeners that if they want to look into it, just to look, type into Google breast cancer birch betula, and there'll be some PDFs from ResearchGate which will pop out. And so I drink birch tea every, most days from the leaves which I harvest in the spring. So just put a handful of birch leaves in your tea every morning, and it tastes good. Can't harm, but it might act as a preventative.
Thank you for sharing that information. That'd be really helpful for so many people to know that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really moving to hear how you understand the medicine of the forest and how you're in concert with it, really, to because my sense of nature and forest are that they want to share their medicine, you know. That's
Mm,
my
mm,
deeply held belief about the nature of nature, is that, bees want to share their honey and trees want to share their bark, and that there's something about this reciprocity, this
mm,
medicine that we have within all of us. And
yeah, yeah,
um
yeah, no, absolutely. And it is an intuitive,
yes.
um, I was going to say skill, but let me put it this way: a high level degree of intuition
Mm.
is part of the process. That if there's countless books now written about herbal medicine, and
Hmm.
but the I work with a guy down in Gloucester called Nathaniel Hughes, who runs the School of Intuitive Herbalism, and I mean he's on the far outer reaches of the weird world of herbal medicine, and he, what he trains people is to open up their emotions to the plant world, and you'll be called to take nettle tea, and that's far more powerful than reading in your book
Yeah.
February what to do, find a nettle,
Hmm.
and so when I collect the bark up here, from the trees in September and October, it's literally tiptoeing around barefoot the trees and just looking into this sort of intuitive meditative space. And obviously, a bit of learning and a bit of research, but you know, why would I want to take the bark of the wild cherry tree? What's that going to, if I say, what are you going to do for me? That's a bit reductive.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I respond to that tree? How's the tree responding to me? So I'll take some bark after asking permission, and then 2 days later I'll go, oof, my foot's, I know, I've got the wild cherry bark. And so that's the intuition.
Yeah,
And what we've forgotten is we're too much in the head these days, and we're not enough
mm-hmm.
in the stomach.
Absolutely. Gosh, what a glorious life you are living. By no means do I think that it's easy. It's hear how hard you work, and yeah, but there is something very phenomenal about your way of being. And I'm also so struck by the tree that you describe as having perhaps the most intimate relationship is the mother tree within
Yeah,
this masculine forest.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's nice to have a caring mother.
It does help.
Most of us, I think, have got complex relationships with our mother, and to have a mother proxy who's a
Yeah,
tree, and who has created, who's with her fecundity has created all these beautiful birch trees, which
yeah,
give me birch leaf tea, and just back to the birch tree, so leaves to collect in May when they come out. By June it's too late. But if you're craving birch in your body, any time of year, the green twigs, a couple of secateurs, bash around, and make an infusion from them.
hmm
Still lots of goodness. And of course, come March, then I'll be tapping the birch trees for birch sap. So the birch is the fountain of much knowledge and much food value.
amazing. So I'm curious for those of us listening, are is it is it open land? You know, is anybody allowed to just to visit the forest and play, or is it something that you have to do by appointment, or how does that work?
Well, in Scotland, as you know, there's the right of responsible access.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have a fence. I don't have a fence around me, and anyone can walk through. If they've got a dog, I request the dogs to be on a lead. If they've got children, I request that the children be allowed to run around without the parents saying, "Don't." Dot, dot, dot. So you can bring your children, providing you don't shout at them and tell them what they shouldn't do. Just let them be. And but I do ask people to check in first before coming up,
Yeah.
um, and because it's so busy up here, and it's a working forest with chainsaws and
Mm-hmm.
a lot going on. But the regular events, which I'll start to set up again. October. That'll be all on Instagram, and I often put on co-host events with my friend in Newbury, Karina Burrell. She's got an organisation called company called Smelly Trees. So you know, she's young and beautiful. I'm old and craggy, so we make a quite a good team. And so we've done some workshops this year, but next year we'll be planning some more. Particularly, we'll be digging down into the apothecary of the forest and doing some steam distillation of plants, and looking at the how to get the maximum value, medicinal value out of the trees and plants around here.
Amazing. Sounds awesome. I'll definitely keep an eye out for that. I think I'm going to have to come up and have a visit. I might need a guided tour of your glorious forest, Rory. I might have to pin you
Anytime,
that.
let me know anytime.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to come now. You're not too far away, and what a magical world you have.
It's
Anyway,
just a bridge. It's just a bridge away.
it's indeed it is. And this hour has passed so quickly. Um,
Yeah.
just so what a journey. I feel like perhaps that archetypal journey of stepping into that unknown in the forest and then finding clearings and then coming out the other side. It has been quite a journey as you've woven your storytelling and all of your wisdom of these ancient crafts into into being for us this evening. It's been a real delight to hear all about the work that you support, and so lovely to know that you're local, certainly to me. But I hope that you've enjoyed this conversation as well, Rory. It's just been fab.
It's been an honour and a pleasure, Caroline. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Oh. And before we go, because I am a bookworm and I always ask people, do you have a book that you might recommend just to our listeners on any subject? It might even be one that you're reading at the moment, just something that we can add to our book lists and get in our bookshelves.
Well, the book which I sort of have with me, well, two books. First is a collection of poems by a Greek poet called George Yorgos Seferis, who is one of the greatest poets of all time. And he wrote a poem called Mythistroma, which is how myth and history correlate. Quite heavy, but very good. And the other book, which I've got, which is far more apt for what we've been talking about, is right with me here. It's called Tree Medicine by Peter Conway. And it is a bit of a Bible for me. And anybody interested in Bach's remedies, so far as they relate to tree medicine, it's a very good buy. Still available, probably secondhand bookshops. So that's Tree Medicine by Peter Conway. Highly recommended.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'll definitely check that out. But anyway, Rory, yes, so we've come to the end of another Inner Dance show, and it has been a delightful journey. And I look forward to everybody joining in again next week. But for me and for Rory, it's time for us to say good evening and much love to you all, dear hearts. And I'm just going to switch the recording off now.